Alrighty, hello you little bacon shaken bakers. Welcome to today's video. If you're new here, you're probably not alarmed yet, or maybe you are. It's an assumption on my part. If you are not new here, you're probably like, Kiki, who is that? What are you're wearing makeup on your face, like an amount of makeup that YouTubers wear. Are you okay? To which I would respond, I'm not sure, but the point is I have makeup on my face because today we're talking about baking, and this that you're looking at is a baked face. As you may or may not know, I have a series called Why Come No One Told Me That, where I go in depth on the different aspects of makeup and skincare, and this is a new series that I'm starting to sort of run parallel to that one, called Troubleshooting. It's a concept and a word that I created. I figured Why Come No One Told Me That can sort of explain everything in the basics, but it would be nice to have a separate space for troubleshooting things that you're having issues with. So on my Instagram, I asked you guys, what are some trends or makeup thingies that you have a hard time with? And so many of you said baking. So we're gonna pull out our mittens. What are they called? Hand mitts for when you don't want to touch the hot. Why can't I think of what these called? Are they just called kitchen mittens? That can't be right. It sounds way too cute. Anyway, we're gonna bake. Wordplay kitchen related insert here. So really quick, let's just talk about what baking is, what its goal is, and what you may have heard about it. Baking is not, as I actually heard in a video while researching this one, literally baking anything on your face. It's amazing to me that I have to say that, and yet here we are. It is the process of setting your under eye mostly, but also other parts of your face with an excessive amount of loose powder in order to give a smooth, pore-like finish. Finish isn't in quotes, but smooth and poreless. Did I say pore-like? I don't remember anymore. Woo! Anyway, you're trying to make your face look smooth, poreless, perfect, with a fuck ton of powder, and then all your dreams come true and you don't have to you don't get any under eye creasing, right? This is the dream and the thing that has been promised in YouTube tutorial after YouTube tutorial. So right at the gate, I want to say a couple things. First of all, I'm going to do those of you who don't want to watch this long video a favor and tell you that the big spoiler, the big secret of this is that baking's not the problem. Your face is. That sounds horrible. Let me explain. Some people can bake and it looks fine, and other people cannot bake and it doesn't look fine. I mean, you can if you want to, but you are not going to get the same results as other people. So in further troubleshooting videos, there will be situations where I'm like, oh, okay, yes, I have like an actual solution for you. Here's what you can do in this scenario. This video, I'm going to give you some best practices, but the reality is, genetically, some people have skin in this area that you can do this with, and other people do not. I do not really. This is pretty uncomfortable on my face right now, and if I had a lens where I could get closer to you guys and it looked like anything, I would show you, but it is definitely crepey and dry, and my skin looks more textured than if I had not baked. So I'm gonna get into all of that, but in case you're like gonna sit here through this whole video because you're like, what's the secret? The secret is you probably just can't do it. I'm sorry, it's terrible news, but it's true, and I am a truth deliverer. So now that I've crushed all your dreams, hopes, spirits, etc., let me clarify a couple things. So I said it's not literally baking, and I say that because I saw in some tutorials people claiming that the heat from your skin bakes your makeup with your powder, and it's a relatively harmless thing to believe, I guess, but just for the sake of clarification, you're not baking your makeup. What you're really doing, like, yes, your skin, your body temperature does warm up your makeup, but what's really happening when you bake is you're finding an easier way to apply an extremely thick layer of powder foundation. So if you use powder foundation, you know, it's pretty hard to build up. It is applied in relatively thin layers because it doesn't have a lot of like grabbing ability. But if you put on liquid or cream foundations and concealers first, and then you put in a ton of powder on top, wait a few minutes, those things are going to sort of absorb and melt together, aided by the temperature of your body, and form essentially a really thick layer of powder foundation. A layer so thick that if you don't naturally have a lot of texture in this area, it'll look pretty perfect and poreless because you've pretty much covered up your pores. If you do have naturally textured under eye area, regardless of your age, that lack of moisture is going to cause everything to sort of constrict and look more wrinkled than if you had not done this. So the big disheartening takeaway from this video is that depending on a few different factors, this technique might just not work for you at all. Those factors mainly are your genetics and whatever procedures you've had done. So a lot of the people who love this technique and really encourage people to do it either have naturally, genetically, a really smooth under eye, and that has to do with both your bone structure and the shape of this area, and also your skin texture. And if you have really dry skin, or the shape of your skull causes your skin to sit in certain ways in the eyeball scrotum, as I like to call it, area, then you're not going to be able to do this without it bunching up your eye testes. But if you are naturally really kind of smoothed and stretched in your ocular scrotes, and you maybe have oilier skin, then this can be something that works really well. Another factor that affects a lot of people that do this and like it is whether or not they've had Botox or any procedures done to their face to stretch and tighten this area. Not knocking it at all. Do whatever makes you happy, but you're going to have more success with this technique if you also have gotten some fillers so that everything's super smooth. And the last thing that affects this is lighting and your viewing point, because there are people who do this and they might really like it because they have a certain comfort level with wearing a lot of makeup, and maybe it does look a little bit crepey and dry, but they like the overall effect. And because they have a controlled lighting source and you're viewing them through a screen or on a stage potentially, you can't see the crepiness. And so if you're at home, likely looking at pictures or videos, you're thinking, wow, that looks incredible, and they're saying, this looks incredible, you might feel very different if your skin texture looked the way that theirs does. So it's just important to keep in mind that somebody might be like, this looks amazing and perfect and flawless, because to them it does, because they feel really comfortable with a lot of makeup on. But then when you try it at home, there's a disconnect because you're like, my skin texture is more noticeable now. But that's just because you have different preferences. So when you have nice lighting, or you're taking a video or a picture, all of the details not going to translate as well, and it's really easy for viewers to think, that looks perfect, why can't I get that effect? When in actuality, it doesn't look like that. And I really wish that there was a way to show people that. Because like I think I said, you can see my skin texture pretty noticeably right now. But on the camera, I think it probably will be washed out a little bit, especially with the flattering lighting that I have. And you might be thinking like, that looks really good, but in person, I don't feel comfortable like this. Like I wouldn't wear this out because it just feels and looks heavy to me. So if you've been trying this at home and you're like, this makes me look crazy, which I gather a lot of you have experienced and are in that position based off of your responses when I asked what things would you like help troubleshooting, I release you from any sense that you're missing out on some sort of under eye unicorn magical trick, because it's not that. It's really just genetics, fillers, and lighting that's making you think that there's something that's so perfect. But even still, I want to show you guys some of the best practices, and then I also figured I would touch on in what cases I as a makeup artist use this technique to kind of inform you so that when you're deciding for yourself, you have an idea. So instances where I might bake someone's face. I started doing some wedding makeup after Caspian was born. For like the first year of his life, I did a ton of weddings on the weekends so that I didn't have to be on set as much, because that was brutal with a newborn. And I really loved doing weddings, and I found that to be a very eye-opening time, getting to do makeup on people that don't always get their makeup done, because working with models and actresses, they kind of know the rundown. And also, most importantly, usually, there's some exceptions, but usually the end game is not about exactly the look that they want. It's about, what does the director want? What does the photographer want? And so you sort of are not, you're not taking you use their influence, yes, because you want them to feel comfortable, but ultimately it's not their design. But when you're working with people that are just going to an event, then your only purpose is to make them feel really beautiful and look really good in the pictures and video from the event. I really loved that, because my favorite part of my job is making people feel like they look amazing and seeing that sort of like sparkly effect take over, which sounds super cheesy, but it just feels awesome and I love it. And I also found it just really educational as far as what people are looking for and what they're comfortable with. So say I'm doing a bridal party's makeup, I could easily bake some of their faces and not other faces, and that happened a lot. And so there's some criteria that I looked for whether or not I would use that technique, and this is what the criteria was. Their natural comfort level with makeup. So when I'm doing somebody's makeup that doesn't get it done all the time, I usually ask them, how do you do your makeup every day? Or how do you do your makeup when you're going out? Because then I get a feel for what they're used to. Because some people are like, mascara, and other people are like, I contour, I da-da-da-da-da-da, and I know how to adjust what I'm doing based off of that, because ultimately I want them to feel good and relaxed in their own skin. So if I think somebody's going to be comfortable with a little bit of a full glam look, then that's one of the markers that I'm trying to check off, because I really want you guys to understand that even if you have the right face structure and skin type for this to work, it doesn't look natural. It never looks like you have done a natural no makeup when you bake. It looks like you've got a glam thing going on no matter what. If a person or you at home are like, yeah, I'm comfortable looking like pretty done up, then sure, that's number one. Number two, I'm sorry, is do they have the face for it? Do they have the bone structure and the skin type that this isn't going to look like a crepey mess immediately? And number three is really a question of what is the circumstance that we're in. Right now I'm already discussing weddings, which is an appropriate circumstance in the sense that I, the makeup artist, am not going to stay there and do touch-ups all night. Or if you're going through this list for yourself, do I want to do touch-ups all night? Do I want to carry touch-up materials, tools with me or not? And so because I know in a wedding, I'm not going to be there and I'm maybe doing their makeup in the morning and they're going to be partying all night, then yes, baking is something that I might want to do if they have the face for it, if they have the comfort level for it, because this shit's going to have to last. For that same reason, I never bake on set. Like if I'm doing someone's makeup for a film or TV setting, I don't ever do this because I am going to be there the entire time and it's my job to make sure that it's looking fresh and good between takes. And so why would I do something that is going to compromise the skin texture a little bit, even if they have the face for it, if I'm there and I can make it look perfect all the time. Another scenario where I might do a little light baking would be like a press event, red carpet type of situation. My natural sort of direction that I go is more of the glowy, undone sort of look, especially when it comes to the complexion. But if somebody likes that style, they request it, then, we might have a little conversation about if it works well for their skin type. But even if it might be a little bit, like for me, my skin this really isn't a technique that I would gravitate towards for my own skin. Even if I liked heavier makeup, I probably wouldn't set it this much and do a full-on bake. But because it doesn't look terrible in person, it's just a little bit crepier, I might consider it. Or like if I were a client of mine and I wanted to try it, it would be okay if the end game, the thing I'm really focused on is the pictures that are going to come from the event as opposed to the, like if I'm going on a date and I'm trying to look good, like in someone's eyeballs right up close with them, like I definitely wouldn't do this. But if I was going to be like speaking or getting my photo taken, I might consider it if I'm like, I don't have room to carry stuff for touch-ups. And yeah, so if a client is in a situation like that, I might consider it. But usually only if they ask me. Otherwise, I would rather just... I also wanted to say, for those of you wondering, like, okay, so what do you do in situations where you don't bake to keep creasiness from happening? I remind myself that makeup is something that moves around and it's not your actual skin. And if I'm going to be there to touch up, or if it's my own face, then I just like lightly set with powder, if that. And I understand that I have to blot things out a little bit. If it's a situation like a bridesmaid doesn't have really the texture for it or doesn't have the comfort level with that amount of makeup, then, I tell them that they're gonna have to do touch-ups. We pray, and I just lightly set it with powder. Okay, so hopefully now you have a better understanding and sort of more realistic set of expectations for baking, and we're going to travel back in time to when I did not have all of this business on my face, and I'm gonna walk you through what my best practices are to get the most success out of this, while understanding that it may just be that you don't like it. Okay, so the first thing that I've done, and what I would encourage you to do if you're trying this, is because I'm going to be putting on a lot of powder and that's going to be obviously very drying, I want to make sure that I've got a balanced level of moisture going in. So people with really oily skin are not going to have to go as hard at this as I have, but basically I hydrated my skin really well. I used a moisturizer with SPF, and then I also used some rosehip oil, massaged that in, especially applying under the eyes because that's already a relatively dry area. I also chose a fairly hydrating foundation. I'm using the Kogan Do Aqua foundation, which I use a lot. It's pretty glowy and it doesn't really dry and set too aggressively. So I'm actually going to use my RCMA palette, which is technically a full coverage cream foundation, but it doesn't set. It stays just in cream form. So it's not going to exacerbate the powderiness of baking of face. And in this instance, I'm not trying to do a natural makeup look, and I already know that. So I'm not going to do what I sometimes do, which is just apply concealer right in the darkest area. I'm actually going to extend it where I would like to highlight, which basically means down past the actual under eye area and a little bit up onto the cheekbone, yeah? One bit of advice is that this area where we typically have a couple of creases where the skin folds so that you can look around, etc., you want to avoid putting product there as much as possible because that's an area that is pretty guaranteed to just a little scorch up and be just not looking cute, looking pretty crepey, pretty testicular. So as I'm applying, I'm kind of like wiping out this little, so many cute words being used right now. Just wiping the eye, scrotum, cleaning it out, hygiene. And as I extend this concealer / highlight up, I like to kind of follow an imaginary line from the corner of the nose through the corner of the nose through the corner of the eye and just kind of cut up like that. You can also view it as an extension of your lower lash line if that line just continued to go up. Depending on your face shape, you may get a slightly wider angle from one of those, and whichever one tickles your fancy, you can use. And while we're doing this, I guess I'll do a little bit right in here and right down here. Nothing different in principle with this, just highlighting down the center of the face a little bit. I'm not gonna be too aggressive with my nose because, as we all already know and we've discussed, it is quite crooked, and unless I'm doing something really drastic, there is no changing or hiding that. So now it's time to make some face pastries. Are you ready? I'm just realizing now this is the second RCMA product in a row. Not sponsored, just pretty solid brand, especially when it comes to this sort of era of makeup application. I tend to always come back to the RCMA No Color powder, which I believe is just talc and silica in it, and it's finely milled. So the last thing before I do this is I'm just gonna one more time wipe out that little cute creasy area. Try to get the product out of it. And now as I apply this, I'm gonna try to make sure my face is really relaxed and I'm not stretching or anything, because if you stretch your skin or your face, and you do it, it's going to just crease up even more afterwards. That's actually a technique we use to age skin and make it look like it has wrinkles and special effects, where you stretch the skin and then you apply latex actually in powder. But to a lesser extent, this would have the same effect, where if I stretch, it's just going to crumple up. So I'm going to try to make sure I'm really relaxed, just chilling, no big deal. And as I've said so many times and continue to say, the actual execution of a lot of makeup is not that complicated. It's understanding why you're doing things and when you're doing things. So this is not, there's no big secret here. I'm just using a damp sponge. I do find that that works the best. A brush, it's just too easy to leave little strokes or things like that, and this really presses it in. Another thing that you can use, I'm making a small addendum to what I just said, besides a damp sponge, would be an actual powder puff, like a velvet powder puff. That works very well also. And I'm just tapping it in, and I'm going to apply that also here where I did that. And sure, why not here? I've applied a thick enough layer that now when I go and do my eyeshadow, if there's any fallout, I can just brush it away, and it's going to, there's a layer that is going to be easy to just dust off into the garbage of the air I'm breathing. So now I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to do my eyes real quick. It's going to take a few minutes. This will continue to sit and absorb and kind of level out to whatever extent it's going to with the products I have underneath and my skin's natural oils. and then I'll come back and I'll finish off the rest of the face. Okay, so I've put all of my eyeshadow on now, and I have not yet done my mascara, lashes, or brow gel. I like to do that at the very end, just so that when I'm dusting away this powder, and I'm going to be using all powder highlights, bronzers, and everything because of this base, I like for the lashes and gels and stuff to be powder free, so I do that at the end. But it's been about 10 minutes probably. You don't have to wait. There's no perfect amount of time or anything. It's really just, you want to make sure that there's enough time for it to absorb. So that could be as little as probably 3 minutes, I would imagine. Just if you put it on and then you dust it off right away, it can kind of move around still and end up a little bit streaky. So I'm just going to take a brush now, and I didn't get a ton of fallout, but there is a little bit, and I'm going to buff the powder, the excess powder, away. I will just give you a live status report. Feels terrible. Absolutely detest the sensation. Not the buffing away, but just the having this much powder on. I want to scratch my face off. It's not itchy or anything. It's just tight, and I don't like it. I will say I've tried this technique on myself a number of times over the years, and this is sort of like the best case scenario. So now that I have all that excess off, I like to warm up the face, do a little contouring, and use blush that has a little bit of sheen in it, and definitely use some highlighter, because even though I've done this technique, usually, and even people with oilier skin types, they typically want some dimension in the face, right? You don't want it to just be completely matte all over, and this is extremely matte, so to compensate, using some products with a little bit of shimmer is a nice way to bring some life back into this dead canvas. So first off, I'm going to use a bronzer that I've actually never used before from It Cosmetics, because I don't use a lot of powder bronzers, and I'm just going to place this more kind of in the contouring method, as opposed to, it smells kind of good, as opposed to when I normally talk about just applying bronzer where the sun hits the face. So I am kind of concentrating it a little bit lower along my cheekbone, because obviously when I've done this big dramatic highlight with this kind of style of makeup, I'd be working against myself if I applied it heavily towards the top of my cheekbone. This is kind of a different way to go about things. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's definitely not natural looking, and because I'm not concerned in the context of a makeup like this with doing something that looks natural, I'm fine with it. Because I don't really nose contour, I'm just keeping this really loose and soft so that my nose doesn't look like 1,000 times lighter than the rest of my face. I'm just bringing that down onto the sides of my neck a little bit so that we don't suffer from floating head syndrome. And I'm going to use the Milani Luminoso blush, and I'm just going to touch that onto the highest points of my cheekbones. I'm going to use it pretty broadly, if that's a word. It is. Of course it's a word, because this is a pretty sheer blush, so it's not too scary. And I'm going to use a little bit of the Hourglass Ambient lighting powder under the eye, just because, again, it's so super matte right now. This is optional. All of this is optional, but I like to not be so matte. And I'm going to use this as a highlight as well, but I am going to do one more highlight on top of it, but just like in that whole area where I kind of highlighted with my concealer, I'm going to reinforce. And while I'm doing things I would never do, I'm going to use a pretty intense powder highlight. I'm just using the Wet n Wild one that everybody likes. Oh, guys! Comfort zone, where is it? So far away. So really quick, I'm going to do my lashes and brow gel and all that business. So I finished everything up. I went ahead and did my lip color as well. While I'm doing things I never do, I used actual lip liner and gloss, like multi-stages to the mouth, and overdrew my lips a little bit. Figured if I'm doing this, I might as well do this. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mist everything with a finishing spray. Now, if you've seen my video on setting sprays, you know that I am not real convinced that setting sprays actually improve the longevity of your makeup wearing, but I do think that setting sprays or finishing sprays can help take away the powdery look from your makeup once you've done, if you're using powder products in this way. So I'm going to take a little bit of rose water with glycerin in it, and I'm just going to mist the fuck out of my face, and it's going to look nice. Obviously, if you use not a waterproof mascara, do that after this process. Now I'm just going to let this melt everything together and drip into my eye and cause me physical pain. Alright, now that that's dry, this is the finished look. I will say, I hate it less than I thought I was going to. It doesn't feel super comfortable. It definitely has some crepey, dry texture, and I can see how over a number of hours it would start to crack a little bit in some places. But depending on your comfort level with makeup, if you're going to an event or something, it's something to consider and certainly something to experiment with, because it might be that your skin works really well with this technique. So I hope that this was helpful as always, and if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. If you liked this video, don't forget to just click like on this video and follow me on Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter at Kiki Makeup, and subscribe to this channel, or else I won't bake you any goods. I probably won't bake you goods as it is, because I don't know where you are and I don't love to bake. Alright, good luck to you, and I will see you later.
And now for something completely different.
Things my heart still needs to know.